So leveraging the power of Cassandra through operational reporting and analytics through Jaspersoft. So a little bit about me. Worked for Jaspersoft for about 3.5 years now. Started in San Francisco in our tech support team. I work in Dublin now in our sales engineering and consulting group there. So kick off with the agenda. So we're going to talk through requirements for Cassandra reporting and analytics. So what I've heard out in the field, what we've had customers ask us to build for them. We'll look at the current state of reporting and analytics, what's out there, and then the third part is probably the meat of the conversation will be around the architectural approaches. How do you pull data out? How do you provide that to the consumers of the data? Then we'll go into a demo, some stuff I've built using our Cassandra connector, and just to show you what that's about, and hopefully some time for question and answer. So let's look at some of the requirements for Cassandra reporting and analysis. So people want access to the data in Cassandra, otherwise it wouldn't be in there, it wouldn't be helpful if people didn't want access. Hello, welcome. Sorry, it's kind of packed in here. There's a little room. If there's a way to get back there, you could probably stand. Requirements for reporting. We're going to look at some architectural approaches. We're going to look at a demo and time for Q&A at the end. So people want access to the data in Cassandra, and as far as I see it, most consumers of that data are not going to be technical. So you have data scientists at the top of a pyramid of users. At the base of those users are folks who are not technical, the people who are working for marketing, who are working for areas where they don't need to know, that they're not developers, they don't have access to the data. Traditional reporting and analytics tools don't work with Cassandra. So Cassandra's fairly new, and it's evolving as we've learned through having to develop our connector various times now as the technology matures and changes. Building reports isn't easy, it's not fun, it's not something developers want to spend a lot of their time on, especially if we're talking about a lot of reports. If you're talking about building one little dashboard in your application, that's fine. If you're talking about building 50 of them, or if you're talking about an application where your customers have to, they're asking you to build custom reports for them, that's not easy or fun either. And then providing ad hoc analytics is very complicated. It's not easy to do for even a developer to provide a tool for others to get data, those non-technical people. So the current state of things, connectors tend to be for relational databases only. So your traditional kind of business intelligence vendors came about in the 70s and 80s, assuming that data was always going to come from a relational database, usually their own relational database, your Oracles, your IBMs, DB2, etc. Those tools tend to be expensive. They tend to be desktop-based, so they were built in an era that's different from today. They were built for installing on desktops, typically Windows only. And they're standalone. You can't embed those those traditional tools that exist. You can't put them into your tools. You can't change them, anything like that. So when you're looking in your applications or as a standalone tool, should I build this myself or should I look for an existing framework that does this for me? You have to think about security and scheduling and APIs and maybe a metadata layer, what charting libraries I'm going to use, flexibility controls. It actually quickly becomes its own project if you're building reporting and analytics into your platform. In fact, it's actually how Jaspersoft got started. We started this as some open source projects. This guy, Teodor Dancu in Romania, in the early 2000s, he has an idea for this company. It's kind of this banking ERP type of system that he's doing. And when he came to reporting and analytics, he said, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to get a tool called Crystal Reports. It's still around in one shape or form. So he goes to them and they tell him, well, it's going to cost you this much. It actually exceeded the budget for his entire project. So he said, I'm going to write my own library. So he called that Jasper Reports, made it open source. And it turns out that his original company completely failed, but that the side project of reporting turned out pretty cool. He published that, and people got around it. Eventually, some entrepreneurs in California approached Teodor, got his intellectual property from him, and built a company around it. And that's who Jaspersoft is. Okay, so we'll look at architectural approaches to getting your data in and out of Jaspersoft. So that was the salesy part of the presentation. But that's what pays for this conference after all. So the fun stuff is architectural approaches. So 4 methods to visualize your Cassandra data. The first one is an ETL approach. So extract, transform, and load your data into another system. The second one is direct access for reports and dashboards. The third one would be direct access for exploration, data exploration. And the fourth one is doing 1 to 3 with Hadoop Hive, which is a cool option with Cassandra. So unfortunately, that leaves us with a lot of choices. Like when you go buy toothpaste and you're like, which one do I get? You got the anti-cavity one or the whitening one. What's the perfect combination for me? So there is no silver bullet answer for this. You have to make that choice architecturally. So let's explore the 4 options that we give you. I'm trying to make this as generic as possible as well, because there's other vendors and there's approaches that you can take yourself. So don't take this as just a Jaspersoft thing. It's a general 4 methods to get that data. So let's look at the ETL approach. Hopefully, some of you can't really see the slides there, but so the way this one works, you have Cassandra, and you have a batch ETL process that pulls that data into probably a relational database. And then you can use whatever BI tool you want to use, because those are all going to work with whatever RDBMS that you choose. What's nice about this is you can combine it with other data. So like our ETL tool has lots of connectors that'll let you combine this data. This would probably be the best suited for an internal, traditional business intelligence use case. I'm talking about some system that sits inside of your firewall that marketing uses to make decisions on, CEO uses to drive steer the ship in the right direction, that type of reporting and analytics. It's the most traditional approach. This is kind of how things typically work within business intelligence. There's some transformations, extract, transform, load into another system. We're extracting the data via a batch method. So you're getting some latency of the data. Like what we're seeing at the top there, well, like our internal kind of ETL jobs run every 15 minutes. So it's a 15-minute kind of latency of the data. which for BI is actually pretty good. We'll call that near time. But you know, some of those jobs could take 10, 12 hours to run, that kind of thing. So sometimes it's that can be a problem in itself, that you're not offering live data, and especially when we're talking about, you know, an application that you have. The expectation when somebody clicks into an application is that everything's happening there. You know? And when you switch over to the reporting and analytics, if it's like, oh yeah, this data is 12 hours old, then people get upset. So they want more kind of real time in a real time application. This is the option with the most connectors. Like out of the box, out of any vendor, you would probably get, you know, faster ways to connect to more types of data. And it's the most robust option. So, pulling data out of the source systems, that's the E part of ETL. The T, transform part of ETL, is probably the most important. It's an exercise you're going through where you're cleaning the data, filtering the data, you can do pre-aggregations of data. You're taking the operational data and it's making sense for business users. And so it's a very popular option, very robust option. So I won't show you a demo of Jaspersoft ETL. They tend to be kind of dry, and that, you know, and now the data flows through here. This is just a screenshot of the designer. It's really it's a designer based on Eclipse that ships with 450 connectors. So my example job here: grab some data out of Postgres, grab some data out of Cassandra, some data out of Salesforce. Did some, also out of a web service, did some basic things like in the web service we have a component called unique row. The Cassandra one we did some aggregations on. Salesforce just goes right into it, and then it does some schema compliancy checks and then spits it out to a relational database. So that's the kind of thing you build. I realize most of you guys are developers, you can just write the code to do this yourselves, that's fine. What an ETL tool does is it helps you operationalize that. So when you're done writing that code, you publish this out to a web management place where you basically give it to your operations team and say, I need this to run, you know, this often. Here's what happens when errors occur. It's a way to kind of hand that off to operations a lot easier than you traditionally would. Okay, so we get into the second approach. The second approach is where we built a native connector using CQL3 into your Cassandra cluster, and then you can build reports and dashboards that will show the data that's directly in there. So no ETL process, no in-memory stuff. It basically shoots it right out to screen, and so that one's going to give you a lot less latency. User clicks, gets the data directly out of Cassandra, no need to go through an ETL job. The reports are developed using a tool we have. It's an Eclipse-based designer called Jaspersoft Studio. You'll get a quick little demo of that shortly. You basically design them in this Eclipse-based thing, and then you publish them out to Jasper Reports Server. Lowest latency, like I said, and it's a good supplement to ETL when near time is required. So if you are, maybe most of your stuff comes from an ETL job, but some of it where the business would get some value from near time or real time, you can combine these two methods. They're not mutually exclusive. None of these four methods are. Okay, so that brings us to, the connector we built is based on, I can never say that word, SDNX. And so I believe that one's based on the Java, official Java driver as well. So we kind of wrapped around that, and that's what how we access it. And you'll see that in my demo. This is a screenshot of an example dashboard. We'll actually play around with this in a few minutes, something I built. So then there's the third method, which is direct access exploration. It's very similar to the previous one in that we're using our native connector. it's bringing the data into an in-memory OLAP engine, and then it allows the user to drag and drop and sort of look at the data in that way. We can parameterize the queries into your Cassandra cluster, so it's not like just doing a dump everything into memory. You can selectively grab stuff and then allow the user to deal with it in memory. So it's different than the last approach in that it's exploration versus predefined reports and dashboards. Because remember, it's non-technical people that want access to the data, not technical. Like if you guys are developers, you'd have a million ways to get to this data. Most regular humans don't have those options. Okay. This is an example OLAP view. We'll create something like this in the demo as well, where we're dragging a few fields over to do a visualization on the fly. The fourth option is with Hadoop Hive. So you can load the data from your Cassandra cluster with libhive, and then we have native connectors both with ETL and with direct. So I don't want to repeat the first three slides or the first three methods again, but you have that kind of method all over again. So it's kind of a big choice you have. So this one's good for massive amounts of data. The other ones, because Cassandra doesn't have much of an aggregation kind of framework in the queries, you can bring it into Hive, and they're going to have better options for aggregating data and HQL. Again, it's going to be a bit of a batch process if I understand libhive correctly and how Hadoop works. Like I said, we have native Hadoop Hive connectors into Jaspersoft and into Jaspersoft ETL. Okay. So a little bit of a demonstration. We're going to look at an example dashboard and report. Look at Jaspersoft Studio. We're going to do ad hoc exploration. And then the environment that I'm running Jaspersoft 5.5, which is it's a web application that's deployed out to Tomcat or JBoss, the J2EE application. And I'm running DataStax Enterprise 3.1 with Cassandra 1.2 on it. So let's get into the demo. I might actually sit down. You guys are also getting a preview of Jaspersoft 5.5, which we're about to release. Okay, logging into this web app here. The first thing I want to do is show you guys a dashboard, probably the simplest one to understand. This is using that direct connect method to write some queries and then bring it into the server and display it. So I'm running a VM with all this stuff. It's a bit scary to do a demo in a room full of people, but it worked. Okay, cool. So this is just a little dashboard with two little widgets showing profit for the last 12 months, just some example data I generated. I have an input control that's passed back to the query. So if I change this to non-consumable, re-executes the queries, re-renders the reports, and shows them to me here. These are good for a high-level kind of overview of data. We see the cost is in the red now. It's costing more than there was some target number that I had set. We use nice modern JavaScript charting libraries in our product that you can easily kind of build stuff into. So you don't have to be a developer to build this stuff. You can you have to be fairly technical, but you don't have to get down into the nitty-gritty of the charting library. We kind of wrap around. The next thing I want to show you is a example report. So we'll go into this table report. So what it's doing now, it's running some queries on the left-hand side to produce the choices that I have. So it basically did a select product family from my sales table, and I select, let's say, non-consumable, and then from that it runs another query to give me the possible departments that I have in my database, and I'm going to choose I don't know, household goods. So now when I hit apply, then it sends the full query over and brings back the data. Okay, so it's still kind of loading the data. It's just showing me the first page, 41-page report. Not too exciting, but I think what's not exciting to developers is having to make this for each user that asks for it and having to do a custom kind of bespoke job for it. So what's nice about it is it lets the end users then further manipulate the report to their liking. So what I'll do here is do a little filtering on the units sold. This will actually, so now I have a result set from Cassandra, and the rest of it I'm going to kind of do in memory. So I'll do some filters on units sold. I'm going to set this to show me only the ones that are less than or equal to 2. I'm also going to change the city to only San Francisco. Maybe that's the city that I'm responsible for. And then I'll do conditional formatting on the cost. So I want to show things that cost me more than £1. So we'll go conditional format, and we'll set it to greater than or equal to £1. Sorry. Where to go? I meant to actually change something there. So what I want to do is maybe change the background to red if it's over £1. Okay, so I basically modified this report in the browser. Now I want to look at this over time. I want to get this emailed to me. So I can just save this in a folder. And then I can schedule it. So I can just click on it, schedule, and it'll take me through a few scheduling screens. Start it immediately, show it to me every week, and choose any parameters. So I might have a time-based parameter that says, show me the last 7 days, something like that. And then I can get notified via email, send me a report with the HTML right in it. So again, it's about making these available to people that don't have, wouldn't be able to have direct access to Cassandra. Everything I showed you there so far as well is available via API. So there's a REST API that you can do the scheduling on, a REST API that you can run the reports and dashboards and get them back into your tool. Okay, and so that was the part that was built by somebody technical. So I'm going to show you the designer for that. Take just a second. Let's see, where were we? So this is that tool, Jaspersoft Studio, built on Eclipse. You can just add it to your Eclipse environment as a plugin, or you can download the standalone version. And what it does is it gives me this plugin right into my Jaspersoft repository. And so what I've done is I've opened up the KPI report, and I'm just going to pull down the definition for that report. So this is basically a skeleton that I've created here of a report. It's really just an XML file that it helps me design. It's got a query tied to it. So I just did select star from sales, where the product family, and this is a parameter that's passed in at runtime, is ran. I limited that so we don't have to wait for the result set. You basically, if change the data adapter. When I hit read fields, it's going to go in and it's going to bring back the fields and assign it to a Java type, which is what the Java driver does. Then I have those as just Java objects. So these fields are now listed as Java objects. I can create variables. So like in this report, I had one called profit per unit sold. So I can do calculations on top of the data. If I go into the variables, I'll show you profit is simply a field. Let's see the end of the screen. So profit is just something that I've taken a field sales minus cost, and that's what's come up with profit. And profits per unit is just a calculation of profits in units. And then the other stuff, I'm doing aggregations in memory. So the sum, things like that is how we're getting the data. There's a whole palette of stuff that I can use, like you would expect in Eclipse. So we've got the charts and all that stuff, maps, crosstabs that you can just drag in and configure. So it's fairly easy to get something started. What's nice too is this is all free. You can go download it, you can use it. The part that I'll show you next is not free. It's part of our commercial product. But the reporting part of it is free. You can go and check it out, build stuff like this, and people can stop bugging you to update this report or to schedule a report. So we'll go back into the server bit, and what I want to do now is create an ad hoc view. So this is that piece where I can do data exploration, where a query is ran, it's going to return it, the results that are going to come back into memory, and then I can kind of further manipulate the objects there, filter and all that stuff. And I don't need to know the query language. I don't need to use a technical tool like Jaspersoft Studio. So I'll go create here. It's going to ask me for a list of topics or what I want to choose from. We have different ways to get at data in Jaspersoft. There's our metadata layer called domains. There's different ways to get into OLAP cubes built using Mondrian and Microsoft SQL for analysis. And then you can build what are called topics, and that's what I've done here. So I built sales model. This is essentially a starting point. You're giving the system a query to start with. Okay, so it's setting up the environment for me now where I can ask the questions that I want to ask. So the first thing is it's still parameterized. I can still pass in n number of queries, like we might want to put something in the where clause that's going to limit it to the last hour's data or to the last whatever. In this case, it's the same filters I had before, product family and product department. I'm going to leave those alone. And then I've got a list of fields and measures that I can use to build my chart. So if I bring in sales and units, it's going to show me right away all the sales and all the unit sales that I have. If I want to break that down by, let's say, product subcategory, breaks it down by product subcategory. So these are snack foods, chocolate candy, gum, and hard candy. We can break it down even further. Let's say we want to do it by city. It'll draw a different bar for each category now per city. Different chart types that you can use. Let's say we want to do a stack column chart, which is showing me each city and how it's sold. We might actually do better with a scatter chart, where I'm showing on one axis I have the unit sales, on another one I have store sales. You can even do simple calculations, like I want to calculate profit, so I have sales and cost. Create a custom field where we take sales minus cost to basically calculate profit. I'm going to take out, let's say, store sales and bring in profit. So I want to see what are my most profitable and selling the most items. So I see I have a big cluster down here, which is, this is probably my least popular item, would be, or the item I'm making the least from is selling gum in the city of Bellingham. I only have 4 units sold there, and I've made $5 off it, not worthwhile. At the top here, the best one would be selling chocolate candy in Salem, seems to be a popular thing to do. So making a lot of money off that, selling a lot of it. So those are the kind of questions you can answer with this tool and allow end users to answer those. Back, I think I have one more slide. No more slides. So that's it. Any questions about what you guys saw, about how it works? Okay, start with you.
So could you just remind the free product, the reporting product, is it each time you run that report it's going to hit Cassandra versus the commercial product, which is maybe somehow collecting that data, storing it somewhere else, and then you can then slice and dice it?
Both of them are actually going to bring the result set into memory. So when I showed you the report where I was like doing the conditional formatting, that kind of tabular one, I didn't have to go and re-query every time that I wanted to filter down some more. There was the filters on the left, those are going to hit the query, but then the result set can be filtered even further. That's with the community edition.
And so what does it do? Attach itself to one node in the Cassandra cluster in order to poll all the other nodes to collect that data?
Well, I guess it's using CQL3, which is, I guess you're hitting the coordinator, and the coordinator's deciding what to do with that and bring the data back. So we're not really at that level with it. We just point to coordinate, like any other client.
Do you ever get issues when you've got large volumes of data and scanning the whole, many nodes?
Of course, yeah.
Yes.
and that's probably where we're going to, like, the Hadoop option is better, or where some ETL job that runs not real time, but in the background.
So what would your guidance be for this, in terms of limitations of scale and
I think there's no single use case that covers everything. I would say it depends if you're wanting to combine a lot of data, like you're wanting to blend data from your CRM systems, and Cassandra's just one of the many things, then go with the ETL approach. If all of your data is in Cassandra and it's a lot of data, go with the Hadoop Hive approach. And if there's some data that you need real time, then go with either those two approaches and some data being connected directly. I actually asked this morning during the keynote session, I asked, what are the plans to add more aggregation functions into the SQL language? And he said, well, I don't know. So I don't think they're going to come, certainly not going to come in a year. So until that happens, your options are to pull the data out either to Hadoop or with your own ETL job. Question back there?
I just wanted to ask about the modeling of the data. I mean, I assume because you can't join or anything, that you have to model your data for every topic that you have pulled into the system. Is that right?
Yeah, basically you have to do that, yeah.
So for every data set that someone needs to view, there's no relationship between them. You just kind of suck in data out and provide you one kind of similar to Tableau style thing, where you've got a repository of data that you can then display differently, but that it's standalone from everything else.
Right. Now with ETL, of course, you could bring in various tables and join them together later. So that would mean you're not getting it live, but you are adding join capabilities to it, so you don't have to worry so much about the data model. It's a good question though, because yeah, the join limitation. Okay. Cool. I think that's all the time for questions. So thanks, guys.